Ian. My name is Graham Reed. I'm chair of the Canadian Spondylitis Association and super excited to be joined uh, almost to a year to the day to the last opportunity that we had both Sam and Audrey in this space on this webinar discussing nutrition and inflammatory disease. You'll recall Sam is a registered dietitian from Northern Ontario. Audrey, also a registered dietitian from Northern Saskatchewan. We have our North represented well and are excited to share those discussions and perspectives with all of you. As usual, wanted just to start with a big thank you to those who help put these events on. We have esteemed partners in the work and the resources that the CSA provides, including through our website, but also through webinars such as this. Today, all of you are generally here for the presentation from Sam and Audrey. I'll provide just a very brief overview of the CSA and some upcoming exciting events for you to get involved with and continue the kind of virtual journey that all of us are taking. I'd be remiss not to send strength and thoughts as all of you navigate the uncertainty of the ongoing pandemic, and really want to express from the CSA that we're thinking of all of you and sending energy to all of us as we navigate this. Also wanted to acknowledge just that I'm joining from Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh lands, what's currently known as Vancouver, and very excited to navigate through this hour with all of you. Many of you likely have seen this before. We're a national association solely focused on spondyloarthritic diseases. We're a not-for-profit. We have a board almost entirely comprised of volunteers living with or affected by spondyloarthritis. We have our executive director, Wendy, and our social media and IT specialist, Dan, both of which are on this call today, and also some international partners. Our mission is to be the leading voice for those in the spondyloarthritis community, providing four things: support, education, awareness, and advocacy. Those make up our strategic pillars. You likely have heard of these, and if you haven't, feel free to check out our strategic plan on the website that outlines a little bit more of each of these strategic pillars and the requisite action that we're proposing to take as the CSA. I wanted to focus mostly on the support one, just for this discussion today. All of you may know that we do have in-group support group meetings. When I joined the CSA, we were around 2 or 3 support groups. We're now up to around 13 or 14. And some of those have actually shifted to online virtual group meetings over the last year. So if you're interested, feel free to send an email to us to get connected to your group and your area. Also want to spend a little bit of additional time on that section on red, the life coaching. We're very lucky to have partnered with life coaches at Mobius Coaching and Management in order to provide CSA members with 2 60 to 90-minute coaching sessions. They're free of charge, and donations are voluntary. And if you're interested in getting involved, just go to our website, spondylitis.ca/coaching, and you'll be able to connect with folks who can help walk through just the reality of living with chronic illness and how to develop strategies to achieve personal health and professional goals. So really encourage all of you to check that out and to use that. We're really lucky to have partnered with certified coaches to do that. We have several upcoming events. The next upcoming event in our webinar series is mid-April, April 14th. We're hearing again from Dr. Dana Lee Bagley. That yet again was another really well-received webinar on chronic disease distress. And then we also have one on May 11th, just after May 8th, which is World AS Day, with Dr. Walter. who's talking about connecting spondyloarthritis. We're also undergoing a process where we are updating our website, and we're excited to see and map out what that looks like in terms of how do we provide the tools and support that allows you to connect with the information that you're looking for when you come to our website. So stay tuned as we do that, and as we bring more and more resources for you and those living with spondyloarthritis. Also want to just give a little reminder that we are beginning and continuing to develop information and resources for women. We've partnered with other patient organizations such as CAP, ACE, CPN to develop a reproductive and sexuality survey that if you're interested, check out our website or our Facebook pages to find more information about. Also, just want to kind of reiterate that we do have a lot of resources. Membership is free, and feel free to join on our website, spondylitis.ca. The last concluding thought that I have, and then I'll turn it over to those who you're actually here to listen to, is that we are providing information, and all of the information should be considered within your own and your unique medical situation. This includes discussing with your healthcare providers or your nexus of care, as I like to discuss, all of those different specialists that support all of us living well with our new normal. So that's it, and I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Audrey and Sam. We're very privileged to have you again, and really look forward to maintaining the momentum from last year, and really look forward to all of the thoughtful questions that were asked last year and that will continue to be asked this year. As I do that, just a reminder that we do record all these sessions, and we will put them up on our website. So you'll see the series of different webinars that we've hosted over the last year or so, where you can find and refer back to the information that is shared in this context. So as I stop and turn it over, we're really pleased to have around almost 200 people combined with our Facebook page, and really look forward to hearing from Sam and Audrey. So Chimigwech, and really look forward to this discussion.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am just getting my screen share set up so that you can see the slides. Okay. That should be up. So I am Samantha. I'm a dietitian in Northern Ontario, as Graham said, and I'll be doing the presentation piece, going through the slides, and then Audrey will join me for the Q&A section at the end. So today we're going to cover a little bit about why food is important to health, and specifically with regards to inflammation, some nutrients that are important to consider with inflammatory conditions, and some patterns of eating that are sustainable options for you. When we talk about eating well for your health, we want you to make a lifestyle change, changes you plan to include for your life, or at least for the foreseeable future until something substantially changes. That means your lifestyle changes need to be sustainable. Making a change that is theoretically healthy, but that makes you miserable, or that requires a lot of time or money investment that you don't have, isn't actually healthy. Because unsustainable change introduces a lot of negative stress in your life, and that suffering is completely unnecessary. It's very possible to make changes that are enjoyable while also being beneficial for your health. But before we get too much into that, let's pause and talk about what is inflammation. So inflammation is characterized by redness, swelling, pain, and heat, the classic 4 signs of inflammation, and it's your immune system at work. In order for inflammation to get going, our body sends signals to either decrease inflammation to get it going, or decrease inflammation through compounds that act as messengers, basically spreading the message to ready for battle or relax. When our body needs to heal a cut or fight invading microbes, it will send out pro-inflammatory messengers. And once the problem is taken care of, the body sends out anti-inflammatory messengers. That's how it works when everything's running smoothly. When we have a chronic condition like spondyloarthritis, or with certain lifestyle habits, feeling stressed or sleep deprived, if you're training really heavily in the gym, or with certain dietary habits, your body is essentially on edge and more likely to produce pro-inflammatory messengers and promote increased inflammation. By eating a diet that encourages our body to have less inflammation, we can have less pain. In addition, just like people without arthritis, eating well helps us to feel better overall. More energy, less digestive issues, better sleep, better mood. How we eat can help shape a lot of different aspects of our wellness. When you're in pain, though, you're more likely to eat foods that are simply convenient rather than looking for food that's also helpful. And it can cause this negative spiral of eating convenient foods that are high in salt, sugar, fat, and the unhealthy types of fats, and low in vitamins, minerals, protein, and omega-3 fats. And that negative spiral of eating convenient foods that aren't healthy for us, making us feel worse, which means we're more likely to grab those convenient foods, is a cycle we want to help interrupt with some of the habits we'll be talking about today. We want to point out, though, that your diet cannot replace medications. When you're in a flare-up, you're probably going to need those NSAIDs or whatever your routine pain management prescribed by your doctor or rheumatologist is. And your lifestyle also cannot cure your arthritis. Even if you're living an ideal anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you can still have joint inflammation that will lead to joint damage in the long term. The lifestyle is still very important in managing your symptoms. It just can't work by itself. So let's get into a few specific compounds of an anti-inflammatory diet. There's a bunch of different stuff that we could talk about, but we're going to focus on types of fats, a nourishing diet, and processed foods. And we're going to start with types of fat. So when we're talking about fats, there's three main categories: trans fats, saturated fats, and unsaturated fats. And there's subcategories as well, which we'll get into. But this refers to the chemical structure of a fatty acid chain. Fats are mostly carbon and hydrogen. When we say it's saturated, it means there's the maximum amount of hydrogen in the chain. Unsaturated fats are not. So it's just the basic chemical structure of it. We want to avoid trans fats, limit saturated fats. We don't need to eliminate, just minimize to some extent, and choose unsaturated. Trans fats, we want to avoid them entirely. We're getting into that on the next slide. Saturated fats are those from meats, dairy, and tropical oils, such as coconut and palm oil. Palm oil is going to be a really common food additive instead of the trans fats options. It's not necessary or even possible to eliminate saturated fats, but they should be the minority of the fat that you take in overall in your diet. If you can reduce your saturated fat intake, or more likely replace it with something that's a source of monounsaturated and omega-3 fats, that's generally going to be positive. So like I said, majority of the fat you eat should be in the category of unsaturated fats. These include plant and fish fats, including omega-3 fats, monounsaturated, omega-6. We're going to get into what all of those mean in just a moment. So trans fats. Manufactured trans fats are produced through a process called hydrogenation. Here they take an unsaturated fat like vegetable oil and add hydrogen to create a more solid fat. On food labels, you would see this as an ingredient as partially hydrogenated oils. When it was created, it was thought it was going to be the best of both worlds, a healthy plant-based oil that was more shelf stable. But we later discovered that trans fats are basically the worst. They increase your HDL, aka bad cholesterol, and decrease your HDL, your good cholesterol. The good thing is that here in Canada, as of September 2020, partially hydrogenated oils cannot be added to food. It was removed from the generally recognized as safe list. So manufacturers can't add it anymore. They weren't required to pull items off store shelves, but that was several months ago at this point. So there should be very little left on the shelves. So if you do see something that has those partially hydrogenated oils or trans fats in the grocery store, you can probably put it back and grab something from the back of the shelf or a different brand. That would be newer. So here we also want to touch on heart health because trans fats, we were talking about cholesterol. So obviously trans fats have a connection to heart health. It's important for us to consider with our inflammatory condition because having high LDL cholesterol is one cause, but having systemic inflammation is another cause of advancing atherosclerosis. So we are at increased risk for heart disease. So it's a little more important for us even to keep track of that. The nice thing is that the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, the diets we're going to be talking about later on, are also beneficial for managing cholesterol, high blood pressure, and high blood sugar. Another distinction we want to make with oils are our omega-6 and our omega-3. So again, just like saturated and unsaturated, this refers to the chemical structure of the fats. If you want to know, it's where there's a double bond between two carbon atoms, and we're just going to skip past the organic chemistry flashbacks. So some of the omega-6 and omega-3 oils are essential. We need some of the omega-6, and our body needs them just like we need vitamins. We need some omega-3 and omega-6 oils. Officially, that's not EPA and DHA because our body can convert another type of oil, ALA, which is a plant omega-3, to DHA and EPA, but the conversion rate isn't very high. And if your ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is too high, it actually slows that conversion rate down as well. So even though we need both omega-6 and omega-3, we tend to get way too much of the omega-6 and not enough of the omega-3. On average, our ratio is somewhere around 15:1. For every 15 grams of omega-6, we get 1 gram of omega-3. The optimum level is somewhere around 4:1 to 1:1. Now, this doesn't mean that we want you to go and measure what you eat and calculate your ratios. It's enough to know that you're probably getting too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3. So reducing your intake of omega-6 by replacing with oils that are higher in omega-3 is going to be a good move. You may benefit from a supplement, but just like Graham mentioned before, we want you to talk to your healthcare team, including potentially a dietitian, before you start a supplement. So let's get into specifically what types of oils this means. What does this mean when we're talking about omega-3, omega-6? Let's boil it down into some actual information. We want to consider a couple different factors though when you are choosing which oil to cook with and which nuts and seeds to eat. Consider with oils, is it going to be heated or used to cook something? Is there a particular flavor or lack thereof that you need? And then which is the best nutritionally? Some oils have a very low smoke point, or the temperature at which they'll burn. Flax oil, as an example, basically can't be used for cooking, but it can be a great ingredient for homemade salad dressing, something that doesn't get heated up. Flavor is another factor that you may want to consider. If you were to make a homemade granola and you wanted to have a coconutty flavor, you may use coconut oil, you may choose to, but it has no omega-3 fats. So this chart here is listing oils from the lowest omega-3 to 6 ratio to the highest. So the best to the worst, to put it simply. So as you can see, flax oil leads the pack in terms of omega-3 content. That's the yellow bit. But as I mentioned before, it's not good for cooking. Olive oil, avocado oil, and canola oil are pretty close in terms of their omega-3 content and ratio. So those would all be good options for your regular cooking oil. They have a little bit different smoke points, the point that they'll burn, but most of the time you can choose whichever you prefer. Once you get above 350 degrees Fahrenheit, then it becomes more of a factor. I personally use extra virgin olive oil for almost everything. The only time we'll use a canola oil, because it has a higher smoke point, is if we're searing meat on the stove and then finishing in the oven, because that gets a little bit too hot. And then I have a chart here on nuts and seeds. And again, it's sorted with the best to the worst omega-3 to 6 ratio. And the yellow bit is your omega-3 content. Ground flax, chia seeds, and walnuts are the best in terms of sources of omega-3. As you can see, the green bit is omega-6. So ground flax and chia seeds have a slightly better ratio than the walnuts. And they actually have more omega-3s than omega-6, which they're the only nuts and seeds on here that have that. But of course, this is only one factor when it comes to which nuts and seeds you're going to eat. In addition to flavor, your just preference, there's other nutrition components to it. You know, almonds give you a nice boost of calcium. Pumpkin seeds are amazing for magnesium. So this isn't telling you, don't eat the stuff at the bottom of the list, but rather try including some of the ones up at the top more often when it comes to omega-3. And then meat and fish. Last chart, I promise. And looking at this chart, it's pretty easy to see why we emphasize fish so much. The other meats here have little to no omega-3. Again, that's the yellow bit. And we specifically want those higher fat fish, your trout and salmon. Lake trout would also be similar to the rainbow trouts. It wasn't listed in the Canadian nutrient file. Lean fish, like walleye, doesn't have much fat in total, so it doesn't have much of the omega-3s. Another reason why we emphasize fish is that DHA and EPA have shown the most anti-inflammatory potential, more so than your plant omega-3s. So in order to get the DHA and EPA, we need to get it either from fish or supplements. For those who can't or don't eat fish, there are also algae-based supplements that have DHA and EPA. And again, talk to your healthcare team before starting any supplements. Next piece of the puzzle that we want to talk about is processed foods. In the strictest definition of the word processing food is necessary. But of course, there's levels of processing. If you take raw potatoes and bake them in the oven, it's technically a form of processing, but it's a beneficial form because it makes the food tastier and easier to eat. Not entirely sure that raw potatoes are even edible. But then there's the next level of processing, taking those potatoes and in a factory setting, making potato chips. In another level still would be breaking those potatoes down into potato starch and reconstituting it into some sort of chip or other product. Generally, when we're talking about processed foods, we're talking about those ultra processed foods that have been dramatically changed from their original form in a factory setting. Because in that processing, it destroys or removes beneficial nutrients and dramatically changes its form. A diet that's high in these ultra processed foods would tend to be higher in salt, sugar, and unhealthy fat, and lower in vitamins, minerals, fiber, and beneficial fats. It's not that we need to eliminate these foods entirely, even if that was the goal, but rather know that it's not beneficial nutritionally, so we don't want it to be a large component. So if we take an example, looking at these 3 nutrition facts tables, I pulled the information into text boxes on the fat to make it a little easier to read. It looks to me like these are from the US. I'm not entirely sure when these pictures were taken, but that doesn't matter for our discussion here today. You can see that each of these have a very different total amount of fat. We've got 10 grams, 0 grams, and 2 grams. Other than that, nutritionally, they're very similar. The one with the most fat has a little bit more saturated fats than the others. But again, what does that mean? Is the fat-free one healthy? Simply because it's fat-free. I think we can agree that chips, no matter what the details are, they're not healthy. You don't want to have them 3 times a day, every day. On the other hand, if you only have it 3 times a year, it really doesn't matter. So if you're having the chips only a few times a year, obviously just pick whatever you're going to enjoy the most. But based on what we've discussed on the fats, probably the middle one with the fat-free is going to be the better option because the fats there are not going to be the beneficial fats. And nutritionally, everything else is close enough. It's basically the same. Unless you're going to hate it. If you're going to hate that one, then your better choice is to pick something else or just have the regular and have it less often. Because in the grand scheme of things, if you have something only occasionally, it's not going to really make that big of a difference. Typically have bigger fish to fry. But the biggest factor when it comes to an anti-inflammatory diet is that it's nourishing. The types of fats, it's important, but it's not the only factor. As always, vegetables and fruit are important to include. If you don't like fruit, you can eat more vegetables. If you don't like vegetables, well, don't give up because there's plenty of different ways to prepare them to make them tasty. But you can also eat more fruit. Yes, they're higher in sugar, but unless you have diabetes, that's not a problem at all. And even if you do have diabetes, make sure you talk to your dietitian on how to include them on a regular basis. Vegetables and fruit are a great source of fiber, vitamins and minerals, and phytochemicals, which are components in plants that tend to be beneficial but aren't technically essential. You're not going to get a deficiency disease like scurvy is one that you get if you don't have vitamin C. You're not going to get that if you don't get these phytochemicals, but we tend to be healthier when we get them. One example would be an antioxidant. A nourishing diet also includes protein, fat, carbohydrates, and enough calories. We need the protein to build and maintain muscle and bone and every other structure in our body. We need fat to maintain our cells. We need carbohydrates for our muscles and our brain. And we need enough calories just to fuel our body. Not having enough of any of these causes a stress state in our body, which is not conducive to the anti-inflammatory lifestyle we want. The opposite of a nourishing diet would be a fad diet. If you can't reasonably see yourself following the diet for years, it's probably not going to be a good fit. When your diet is insufficient in calories or any particular nutrients, it's not going to be sustainable. In addition to vitamins and minerals, we need calories to live. It's the gas that fills our tank and makes our brain and our body go. Nutrients are also required for basic function, again, vitamins and minerals. If you don't get enough, your diet will fail sooner or later. You need food, you need good food to have good health and enjoy your life, because that's really what it's all about. So let's talk about a couple of different diets that will fit the specific recommendations that we've discussed. So we're going to talk about a balanced plate, flexitarian eating, DASH diet, and a Mediterranean diet. The balanced plate is shown in the newest Canada's Food Guide. Half your plate fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, and a quarter proteins. Your plate obviously isn't going to look exactly like this unless maybe you're at a buffet, but these are the approximate proportions you can aim for. Half your plate, some sort of vegetable or fruit, a quarter starches, whole grains, potatoes would also go in that corner, and a quarter proteins. Meat, nuts, fish, and dairy is officially included in that corner on the food guide. But you could also have a glass of milk on the side. That would also work. As we've already mentioned, a well-balanced diet that is nourishing is anti-inflammatory. It covers all your bases with vitamins and minerals and proteins and all of that jazz. Just keep in mind to include fish, nuts, and seeds, and use olive, avocado, or canola oil most often, and you're well on your way. A lot of people complain that eating like this would cost more, but for the average person, it actually costs less because you're decreasing your meat portion, which is by far the most expensive item on your plate. And you can reduce your meat budget even more by replacing meat with beans or other alternatives on occasion. And then when you also consider the satisfaction factor of eating a balanced plate that has vegetables, carbs, protein, and fat, it fills you up and satisfies you for much longer than a plate full of more processed foods. The Mediterranean diet, as well as the DASH diet, which is next, remain and have for quite some time been the top anti-inflammatory and heart-healthy diets. We went into more detail on the Mediterranean diet during last year's webinar, and there's a whole article up on the website about the Mediterranean diet as well. It's one of our favorites because it's fairly easy to understand, and not only does it work well with the recommendations for an anti-inflammatory diet, but it's usually the diet that's used in research on anti-inflammatory diets. So the Mediterranean diet is based on fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, whole grains. Olive oil is the main source of fat. Fish, at least a couple times a week. Small amounts of dairy daily, and red meat and sweets are treats, basically. The DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, obviously was built to help manage blood pressure, hypertension. It emphasizes less processed foods, more fruits and vegetables, nuts most days, and lean meat. It specifically recommends a low salt intake. Again, it's about blood pressure. The Mediterranean diet also tends to be lower in salts than average North American diet, simply because it focuses on more home cooking. The biggest difference between the two is that the DASH diet recommends a lower overall fat intake. If you talk to us or any dietitian, we're definitely going to still recommend you eat fatty fish a couple times a week, while in the DASH diet to get those omega-3s. And once we make that little modification, the DASH diet fits in with all of our anti-inflammatory recommendations. And the last one option we want to throw out there is a flexitarian diet. The flexitarian diet is a plant-based diet. When we're saying plant-based, we mean a diet based on plants. Meat is still allowed, which the fad term plant-based, really they're meaning vegan when you see plant-based in the media lately. Flexitarian is a term that was coined back in my university days or earlier. It means that a person eats kind of vegetarian. They might eat vegetarian all day and have a small portion of meat in the evening, or maybe they eat vegetarian most days when they're at home, but when they go to a restaurant or a friend's house, when that's allowed, they'll eat meat. Flexitarian can be a lot more sustainable for a lot of people because it doesn't prohibit meat. It's not a hard and fast rule. You can have that flexibility, but meat becomes a treat or a less common food. It can also be more difficult for some people because it doesn't have any hard and fast rules to stick to. So you can set your own rules. Maybe you do the no meat before 5 p.m., no meat at home, no meat on weekdays. Any of those options or anything similar would work. To get started, you could simply learn a few vegetarian meals. One super simple way, if you've never had a vegetarian meal, would be to substitute beans for ground meat. One time I was making pasta sauce and realized I had forgotten to take ground beef out of the freezer. So I just rinsed off a can of black beans and threw that in instead. And it worked really good. I had penne noodles with it and it was delicious. Obviously the texture is different, but it was just as tasty. So that's also an option for those of you who want to try it. So let's summarize our session today with a few key messages, and then we'll get to your Q&As. So we haven't explicitly mentioned this a ton today, but we want to eat a variety of foods. A variety of colors and types of food within each broad category: vegetables, fruit, greens, etc. It's a simple way to help ensure that you're covering your nutritional bases. Aiming for balance. The balanced plate is one form of balance: half fruits or veg, quarter protein, quarter whole grain or starch. And another form of balance is including some foods for fun on occasion, like some delicious little cupcakes. We do want to limit processed foods, added sugar, and salt. These principles are going to apply no matter what diet or health condition we're talking about. Again, not totally eliminate, but limit. Keep them in their proper place when we are talking about that balance. Include nuts, seeds, and fish that are high in omega-3s regularly, and have fruits, vegetables, and whole grains every day. And while an anti-inflammatory diet is an important piece of the puzzle and something that Audrey and I talk about a lot being dietitians, it's not the only thing. Beyond what you eat, it's important to stay hydrated, find ways to move every day, get enough sleep, take care of your mental health, and maintain healthy relationships. These are all key components to a healthy lifestyle that adds to your life. And most importantly, you want to choose options that will work for you. We all have a unique combination of needs, challenges, and preferences. So the exact details of what your healthy lifestyle looks like is going to be slightly different. from mine, from each other's. And even while following the same principles that we discussed here today, that's true. We're all a little bit different and unique. So now, after what felt like a little bit of a whirlwind, we'll welcome Audrey to the party and do our best to answer as many questions as we can in the time remaining. And all the questions will be collected and we'll post answers in the near future on the website. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Graham had to step out, so I'm filling in for Graham. There's just a few questions that have come in so far. I'm not sure if you want to start by addressing them just from the Q&A, or if do you want me to ask them myself, which is what we had originally talked about. So maybe let's stick with the original plan. The first question was, I wonder if dairy products are inflammatory.
I haven't seen any research papers that show that dairy products to be inflammatory at all. They are part of the Mediterranean diet, which, as I said, is the diet that's used most often when it comes to researching diet and inflammation. I'm not sure if Audrey has anything more specific that she can add to that.
Sure, I can just add in that there's actually another type of fat. I know Sam went over all the different types of fats out there, but we also have another kind that's in dairy products specifically that is actually a type of, we don't say it in the public generally because it's confusing. It's a type of trans fat, but it's actually heart beneficial, whereas all the stuff Sam talked about, those are the more common trans fats out in the world or in our food supply. But there is a type of trans fat in dairy products called CLA that's actually beneficial for our hearts. So in general, no, dairy wouldn't be considered an inflammatory food unless, of course, you have an allergy versus an intolerance to it. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question coming in. Where would peanuts fit into this?
I just went back to my chart and I don't have peanuts on there. So I'm not sure. I know they aren't one of the really high in omega-3 ones. They're probably somewhere in that middling range where, I mean, they're not specifically high in omega-3s, but if you enjoy them, there's other benefits to having peanuts, other vitamins and minerals.
Okay. Is there a recommended daily amount for omega-6 and 3?
There is, but you're definitely getting enough omega-6. The omega-3, moving towards increasing your omega-3 is a good choice. If you're at the point where you're debating a supplement, then talking to someone in your healthcare team and getting the specific recommendation for you would be the best choice. The recommendation for fish is to have at least 2.5 ounces twice a week of the fatty fish.
Okay. Can you please share how the correct ratio of omegas support reduction, modulation of inflammation?
That's going to be a longer answer that would probably be best answered on the website, I think.
So
or at least more clearly answered.
We'll grab that. I appreciate it.
I guess the bottom line of that one is, remember, the ratio is more important than it helps with the the heart health benefits, versus if your ratio of 6 is way high compared to your omega-3s, then you increase inflammation.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Why do sweets and desserts cause inflammation?
Do you want me to?
Yes, please. I'm having trouble summarizing thoughts.
Yeah, it's not that one specific sweet, say if you eat really well, healthy foods throughout the day, and then you have a dessert with your evening meal or something. That's not going to have a huge impact on your overall health compared to having consistent choices with lots of sugar in it. When we look at the amounts of added sugar we should have in a Canadian diet. It's about 6 teaspoons for adults. And it's a very clear distinction between added sugar and naturally occurring sugar. So like Sam talked about, fruits that have sugar in them, we're not focused on those sorts of things. It's the yogurts you choose that are flavored, that have up to 3, sometimes 4 teaspoons of yogurt, of added sugar in one little container, for example. And it's choosing chocolate milk instead of white milk, or it's choosing drinks is probably the bane of my existence. The sugar sweetened beverages, 1 can of pop, everybody knows has 10 teaspoons in it, but most people don't understand what they're consuming when they make choices like juice or iced tea or any of the flavored drinks have oftentimes way more than what pop would have in it. And so when we take those choices, consume those choices consistently throughout the day, we're putting extra pressure on our gastrointestinal tract to try to clear or make use of all that extra sugar that is just straight sugar. When we eat a piece of brown bread, for example, it's got a lot of other fiber and different things in it that your body has to work hard to pull apart to access the sugar. Whereas if we just drink a big glass of juice, our body has to work hard at actually managing our blood sugar is going to go way high. It's going to spike that, but then we have to work hard to kind of lower it and keep it at a consistent level. And so when we're doing that consistently day in, day out of having these sweets and the processed foods that have lots of added sugar in them, it adds that extra tax on the whole digestive tract and your digestive system. Hopefully that answered that somewhat.
Oh, that was good. Lots of folks in the AS community advocate for starch-free or keto-style diets. Is this a good anti-inflammatory diet?
I can start with saying that a keto diet is usually not recommended for a long time period. Sometimes, especially in situations with epilepsy, it is something that's actually used as a treatment for someone who has epilepsy, or can be. But we don't usually see it for more than 2 years at a time, and that's a long time even at that point. It's a lot of stress on your body to eat consistently in a keto fashion. And I think the other part was, starch-free. Yeah, that a lot of people wonder about starch. The bottom line is starch is a type of sugar. Carbohydrate is just the broad name for sugars, but we have different types of carbohydrates. So starch might be in a lot of different forms in the different foods that we eat, but they don't necessarily cause inflammation on their own. It's the overall diet. So no, in general, we don't recommend starch-free or keto. To go totally starch-free would be pretty tricky, to be honest, but it's all about that moderation again. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
No. With the keto, I know of one dietitian who does keto, not for inflammation, but for other reasons. He takes people through it. But even then, it's not a lifestyle change. It's a treatment for a short period of time for a specific reason. And then he transitions people to Mediterranean. So when we're talking about inflammation, why don't we cut out the middle step and just go straight to inflammation, or straight to Mediterranean? Again, it's sort of that stress state because it's not a complete diet, as I mentioned, as I described it earlier.
Okay.
I'm noticing, Wendy, a lot of things popping up in the chat. So I'm not sure if you're able to grab that at the end as well.
I will. I didn't see that, so I'm going to monitor sort of both. But if I can just remind people to pop their stuff into the Q&A, that'll make my and Dan's job easier. I have a question from Olivia. I have been reading and speaking with others who have had success with autoimmune protocol diet, which allows for mainly meat, vegetables, and some fruits. Can you speak to this? And if there are any current research out there supporting this diet for people suffering from autoimmune disease?
Sounds a lot like the Flexitarian diet that Sam was mentioning in the presentation, which is a healthy way to eat for sure.
Yeah, the autoimmune protocol specifically, I don't know very well. I don't know the specific rules, so that's something we would have to look at to speak to specifically.
Okay. I'm just going to kind of keep going here. What about the consumption of alcohol, the impact on inflammation?
Right, so that again too, if there are national guidelines or Canadian safe drinking guidelines, if you just Google that, you'll find what they are. Basically, it's about just about a drink a day for women and up to 2 a day for men. And you can't save them all and have them all in one night and on the weekend, that doesn't count. But there are some, and this is where that moderation word gets annoying to people, but that is the truth. When you have a little bit, it can help. I mean, if you're not a drinker at all, don't start. But if you do drink, then there is some evidence about how that does help decrease inflammation in the body. But as soon as you get past those safe drinking level guidelines, then you're going to have the opposite effect.
Okay, if a person eats low salt, high fruit and vegetable intake, include low fat dairy and meat, except nuts, would you still call it a DASH diet?
Yeah, that is a DASH diet. Yeah.
Well, different things in that one. I think it matched. Yeah.
I think so. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, DASH diet is fruits, vegetables, low salt, low fat dairy and meats, nuts most days, and that's the DASH diet, essentially.
Okay, there's a question here. I've seen a couple questions about dairy, so I might not be paraphrasing properly, but when I have milk, there's always a backlash of lots of phlegm that day, coughing. So it's just an intolerance to dairy.
Yeah, it could be. A lot of people do get phlegmy from the lactose. So I think the biggest thing about dairy to differentiate is the lactose is the carbohydrate component or the sugar component of dairy, but the protein like casein or whey is a separate thing. And that if you have an actual allergy, you're allergic to the protein. But if you have things like phlegm or gas or diarrhea, those sorts of things after consuming dairy, then that's a reaction to the carbohydrate portion of a dairy. That's not going to really hurt your body. Whereas if you consume protein that you're allergic to, that does cause a response in your body, an immune response that you don't want. So yeah, so it probably is a bit of an intolerance to dairy, but it's intolerant to the lactose component, not to the allergic, like to the protein component. Sam, do you have to add?
Yeah, so likely you can just do the experiment of getting the lactose-free milk. And if that takes care of the negative symptoms that you're getting when you have milk, then there's your answer right there.
And then there's another question about, are there other dairy-free products that are better? So somebody says, I usually feel less bloated when I drink oat milk.
Yeah, there are lots of different non-dairy products on the market these days. So the biggest thing you want to look for is just the fortification of it. You know, are you getting any calcium at all? Are you getting any vitamins in it, or is it just you can kind of put any product in a liquid and let it soak, and that would become milk. So is that necessarily a healthier option? Not necessarily, but if they do have the added nutrients, if it's fortified, then you are getting your nutrients from that.
Yeah, and what you're going to be wanting to look at is this sugar content for if they have added sugars and whether it's been supplemented with calcium and vitamin D.
Okay. What is the role of supplements, vitamins, and minerals in diet, especially if you are eating healthy anyway?
Yeah, if you're eating healthy anyway, you probably don't need any supplements. Unless you have a particular reason why your diet might be insufficient, or, you know, when you're pregnant, you kind of have to take a prenatal, but otherwise, if you're eating a well-balanced diet, you shouldn't need any.
And regardless of age, Sam?
Yes, that's true. Help me here, Audrey.
Age 50. Yeah, start taking your vitamin D at age 50.
Thank you. I have a 3-month-old, so brain's a little slow occasionally.
Yeah.
So Audrey, can you just expand on that? I know the gentleman who's asked this question, and he is over the age of 50. And so I was wondering if you can just provide some insights into sort of above 50 and under 50.
Right, so it's at 50 where we start to recommend that. So taking their vitamin D is measured in micrograms. So you'll see a little, it looks like a U and a G. So that's usually about one pill is about 400 micrograms. And you can take about one of those a day to have enough vitamin D. Vitamin D is a little bit different when we look at all the recommendations for specific nutrients or specific vitamins and minerals. When we factor in all the different patterns of eating, that's the only one that we can't really get enough of. And I'm sure it stems back to the fact that vitamin D is actually more of a hormone in the body. It's not a vitamin like the rest of the vitamins are vitamins. And so it's prepared and it's functions way different than all the other the vitamins in our body. So yeah, so once you turn 50, it's recommended to take that 400 micrograms a day. But the other big thing is if you live in the north. So if you think of like Edmonton, and I'm in La Ronge, we're about the same. We have long latitude as Edmonton, that you want to take a bit more. Is too much vitamin D bad? So that is a concern with any vitamin or mineral that you take. If you're taking one specific thing, like if you're taking tons and tons of vitamin A, for example, or vitamin whatever, then that's where we get concerned. We don't want over tons of anything, because we can reach a threshold in our body at some point, and then we're going to see problems after that threshold. Usually what we see, if you have too high levels of vitamin D, is you're actually going to see calcium buildups in your body, because your vitamin D helps your body use and store calcium. It's really high though, to be honest. It's, there's studies of like 10,000 micrograms a day. So it's really high. So I think the question here is about 2,000 a day. Overall, in general, probably not. It's still probably higher than what our recommended upper limit is. But it depends too on the rest of your diet. If you're getting absolutely nothing from the other foods in your diet, then you're probably okay. But yeah, vitamin D, 400 international units, yes, would be good a day.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess also, check in with your pharmacist or your local dietitian or your healthcare provider. Yeah. About
you have to assess the whole diet to, exactly, give you a good recommendation. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There has been an increased information about the benefits of I have to look at my monitor now, guys. MCT oil. It is a saturated fat that is linked to heart benefits, brain health, and more. What are your thoughts about MCT oils and inflammation?
What I've read about them, I'm very neutral on them. I don't think they're the thing that's going to really decrease much more inflammation than any of our other healthy fats. Sam has input there.
Yeah, the MCT oil, it's been a long time actually since I've looked into it. It's a specific product. Some people, when they start talking about MCT oils, they start talking about coconut oil, because coconut oil has some MCT oils, but they are two different things. MCT oil is a specific product, basically. And I actually haven't looked at it in the context of inflammation. Last time I used it was in terms of someone who had GI issues and was getting tube fed. And someone just popped into the chat, it popped up that it can give GI side effects, which of course is another factor to consider.
Here's an interesting question I have not seen, so let's ask that. Splenda or sugar, which is worse?
Depends on amount.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say as well. And it also,
sorry, go ahead.
It also depends on your health conditions, right? If you have diabetes, sugar is worse, no question about it. having a pop with regular sugar versus a diet pop for someone with diabetes, you're better off with the diet pop. So that's another thing to consider. But yeah, it depends on the dosages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question, I've seen a couple now. This person can't have more than 5 to 7 grams of fat a day due to pancreas problems. So I cook at home without fish, without oils, and don't eat nuts. Is that a problem?
No, you need to eat for your specific situation. So I wouldn't encourage consuming fat just based on what we're talking about tonight, because your situation is obviously very unique to you. So I wouldn't encourage that in general. So,
Yeah. I would just say, if you haven't already had the conversation, to talk about medication options or enzymes. So for some people with pancreas issues, that can be a huge boost to be able to have some more variety in your diet without having the side effects. So if you haven't had that conversation with your primary care provider or whatever specialist is helping you with that, that's a good conversation to have.
Okay. There's been a few questions about nightshades. So there are lots of claims that vegetables from the nightshade family, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, can cause inflammation. Is there any evidence of this?
No, this actually goes back to way back, because there actually are some nightshades that are poisonous. And for example, the greens of potatoes are toxic. So there is some plants in the nightshade family that are toxic, but not the ones that we eat. So that's the very short answer I would give. I believe we answered this in the Q&A last year. So we'll tackle that again, and maybe that would be a good one for potentially a lengthier article. But
yeah.
I feel like that's also been written a lot of places as well. Yeah.
Here's an interesting question. How do we know if our body is absorbing the nutrients from foods and vitamins?
Yeah. It is an interesting question, because you won't really know unless you encounter a problem, basically. If that would show a malabsorption, that if you started having a specific symptom, that could be linked to a specific nutrient. But otherwise, you wouldn't really know unless you have lab work done. Unless, Sam, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't really know, and we're all a little bit different, especially once you factor in our gut microbiome. But for the most part, this is just getting into more detail than we need to the vast majority of the time, unless there is a potential issue, which would likely be identified in blood work.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And I've seen, I'm sure you'll giggle, but the word turmeric come up a few times. So the question is, how effective is turmeric in reducing inflammation? Turmeric versus omega-3, is there only one that is more anti-inflammatory?
In general, I'd say an omega-3, but there's an active component of turmeric called curcumin. So if you're looking at labels, it's the CRUR, or curcumin, CRCUR. So look for that specifically if you're buying a product. If it advertises that it is some wonderful turmeric something or other, it has to have the actual full turmeric in it, not just kind of flavored. It doesn't have, it's not going to fix your inflammation, but it is going to contribute to anti-inflammation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a friend who has an inflammatory condition as well, and she has her golden milk with the turmeric in it, and she actually said, you know what, I don't care if it's placebo or not, it makes me feel better and it tastes good, so I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah. So that's also a factor as well.
Okay, I just have one last question, which I actually found interesting as well. Not that they all aren't interesting, but maple syrup and honey, how do they compare to white sugar? or brown sugar? And I get this question kind of coming up a lot to myself personally, so I'm interested to hear your comments.
Sugar is sugar. Technically, brown sugar, maple syrup, they do have some little tiny trace amounts of vitamins and minerals specifically. But the amount that you would have to eat in order for that to be a significant amount of the minerals puts you into a category of having too much sugar. The one benefit to the brown sugar, maple syrup, etc., is sometimes you can use less sugar because there's a little bit of flavor to it. That would be the only thing.
Okay. All right, we're going to wrap up the webinar. We got started late due to our technical difficulties, and we have gone late. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank Sam and Audrey again for putting this amazing presentation together. As you can tell, we had close to 600 people register. As Graham noted, it was recorded, and we will be posting the session on our webinar, and we will be communicating out to everybody who registered that it is available. So for those who weren't able to attend this evening, they have the opportunity to go back and watch. I want to also thank everybody who registered to attend. Really happy to see such a great interest in this topic. I think it's really important that, you know, we're taking care of all of the other things that are going on in our journey living with spondyloarthritis. And so nutrition is definitely really important. Encourage everybody to continue to check out our website for our upcoming events. You know, we listen to what you tell us, and we are delivering programs based on input from you. And on that note, we will be circulating a very short, absolutely 2-minute evaluation tomorrow by email. Please take the time to complete it, whether you were able to attend tonight or not. We appreciate your feedback on the event, and we appreciate insights into what's of interest to you, how you like to learn, and when we're planning future events. So please take a moment to do that when we circulate that tomorrow. And for those of you that had issues logging in, we do apologize. We don't know what happened with our Eventbrite link, but thanks to Dan, we got that sorted out very quickly, and you know, got a lot of people on board with us. And again, I just really want to emphasize special thanks to Sam and Audrey. Truly amazing. Second year in a row delivering a knockoff presentation, and we look forward to let's see, we'll call it Nutrition 301 next year during Nutrition Month. And I hope everybody has a really nice evening. We will be going through the questions that were asked, and Sam and Audrey have volunteered to sort of put together another Q&A answers based on the questions that you've asked that we didn't get to. And we'll let you know when that is available. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody what's left of their night, depending on where you live. Have a happy evening, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on April the 14th on mental health, chronic disease distress with Dr. Dana Lee Bagley. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Good night. Thanks, Wendy.